there's hope and you can pull yourself out of it with no shame, no blame, no judgment, and you can start building the kind of life that you know you deserve.
Welcome to Women Thrive podcast. This is where you'll get to hear incredible stories of female entrepreneurs, business owners, women from all walks of life. Myself, Raimonda Jan, and my co-host Abigail will be interviewing incredible women, hearing inspiring stories of women from all around the world. I have no doubt that you will find something that will be life-changing for you. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join us for our future episodes.
Hello and welcome to this podcast episode with me, your host, Raimonda Jan. I'm so excited that you are here for another amazing episode with some of our guests from Women Thrive Summit. Today, I have the wonderful Kathryn Traff. Hello, Kathryn. How are you?
Hi, Raimonda. I'm so glad to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. I know today's conversation is going to be a really interesting one and perhaps awakening to some people. Now, Kathryn, you have quite a story and you've spent quite a few years working in a medical field, but today is not what we're speaking about. Actually, today we're talking about how to leave that gray zone of drinking and perhaps never miss alcohol ever again. So I want to introduce you my special guest today, Kathryn Traff, who is an alcohol exit strategy expert. If you've never heard of this term, me too, but stick with us. So Kathryn is passionate about helping women out of that gray zone drinking and into their healthiest and happiest versions of themselves. After her 17 years of career in neuroscience, she pivoted into entrepreneurship to help others walk away from alcohol and never miss it. So she uses her Revive methodology that blends neuroscience, mindset work, and faith practices to completely change her clients' brains, their attitudes, and actually their entire lives. Kathryn, pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to talk to the audience and the Women Thrive community as well, because you're right. This is something I'm tremendously passionate about because I used to live that life. And I get to share with everyone now today that if you're in that place right now, there's hope and you can pull yourself out of it with no shame, no blame, no judgment, and you can start building the kind of life that you know you deserve.
This place that perhaps, as you say, I really love the way you describe it as gray zone because a lot of people might be using alcohol for various reasons, whether to numb pain, whether to use a social thing or just to get by with their day. But perhaps they don't class themselves as an addict or they're having a drinking problem, but it's becoming a bigger and bigger part of their lives. And frankly, it's quite hard to find the help when you are in that gray zone. Would you agree?
It really is. And that's quite frankly what kept me for too many years not doing anything about my gray zone drinking problem, because I would endlessly Google, am I an alcoholic? How much is too much? And I never really got an answer. It directed you to rehab websites. It directed you to AA. And I've known people who really have struggled with alcohol addiction, and I wasn't that person. But I knew if I didn't do something about where I was then, I was on my way to becoming into somebody who would really need those kinds of services. So I got to the point that there must be a way to do this because I don't want to wait until I have a problem that requires drastic measures. I wanted to do something about it now.
Yeah. And Kathryn, so tell me a little bit more about your background because you've spent 17 years in the medical field before you become an entrepreneur to do this work.
Yeah. It was my privilege to work in the field of neuroscience. And by that, I mean, I got to work side by side with neurosurgeons, neuropsychologists, neurologists, psychiatrists, and in varying roles through my career, everything revolved around the brain and the way it worked. And so it's safe to say I'm an absolute brain nerd. If you get me into a conversation talking about the brain, good luck getting away from me. But what I learned in that career and working from some of the brightest minds in the world, I worked at places like Mayo Clinic, Stanford, and I started to understand exactly the way the brain worked, why it worked the way it did. And I was endlessly fascinated by it. So that brought me to the place of when I wanted to do something about my gray zone drinking problem, I thought, you know what? I've got all this information. I need to figure out how to start getting this information to work for me. How can I start filtering through it and start packaging it so it serves me? Because I could not find anything to help me. I came close with finding a group of women who offered an online course. And that was very instructive because they were talking about what the latest data was around brain health, what alcohol does in the brain, especially when you are at the midpoint of your life, like I was. I was 55 years old at that time. And as I started digging into the data and looking at the brain imaging, I was fascinated. And I thought, you know what? There's something here. And what gave me the most hope about it was that, oh my gosh, of course I'm struggling with this because we were lied to about the medical implications of what alcohol is and is not in the body. And as soon as I understood that all the medical information that we had previously been sold about alcohol actually being good for you, turns out it is not true at all. And that took away so much shame and blame and judgment that I had about myself, about why was I in this loop of the gray zone drinking, that once I got to that place, the rest was easy. And it was a matter of putting mindset principles together that I had worked on and to get myself through the parts of the day where I would normally have the cravings. I started to turn to my faith practice more. Instead of turning and opening a bottle of wine, I would open scripture, I'd watch videos. And as I was practicing those three things together, I had more and more success. In fact, I had no days where I stumbled and I had drinks again. It's been a completely linear path. So that neuroscience background and the time that I spent there was absolutely critical to developing the program that helped me succeed and that I help women use today for their own success.
Wow, that's amazing. And it affects so much of our lives, from social interactions, perhaps with our family, to our health, and especially later in life, as perhaps women are experiencing menopause. It's already taking a lot of hit on our bodies, let alone what alcohol does on top of that.
It really does. And one of the things that I discovered, and I'll just share my personal story because I think this will help anybody who might be watching who's struggling and going, you know what, that might be me. The thing that I noticed was as I was going through menopause, I had severe brain fog. And I even got to the point I was working at this point in my career, I was working in the operating room with neurosurgeons. We were doing extremely complex, either spine surgeries or brain surgeries. And I ran the imaging systems for these surgeons. So I had to be on top of my game because the surgeon completely depended on me. And I had such bad brain fog that there were times where I couldn't remember how to run a particular part of the system. And it nearly cost me my job. So I started to understand that I have to do something about this brain fog. And I'm pretty sure the alcohol is not helping because I was waking up in the middle of the night. And as I started to get rid of the alcohol, I started sleeping better. I started eating better. And the brain fog started to subside. So I want you to know that, yes, alcohol will only make, if you're going through menopause right now, it will only make it worse. So please, let's talk about that, about giving that up.
Yeah. Did you feel like there was moments in your life where you relied on alcohol more than perhaps you should? And how did you navigate those parts of your life?
As far as my experience goes, I found myself the demands of working on a neurosurgeon's schedule because I worked when they worked. I didn't have my own schedule. So the demands of that could be very intense. And of course, there is a patient on the table who's depending on everybody doing their job perfectly. And I took that very seriously. So I would get myself completely wound up during the day. Busy brain. What's next? You always had to plan for if something goes wrong, you had to have a plan for it. So I walked into the operating room with a minimum of 4 plans. The mind was always going. So when I got home at night, I could not get my mind to turn off. It was going. And I kept looking at my phone, waiting to see if I was going to get called in back to the hospital. So the thing that I did was, number one, I would tell myself, okay, I need a reward because I just put in this very long day. And number two, I need my mind to turn off. And I also walked around like this all day long. And so as soon as I had the first glass of wine, I went like this. Shoulders started to come down, started to relax, and the mind started dialing back down. It was incredibly powerful and incredibly useful for a time. So unfortunately, that soothing behavior started turning into what I thought of was a version of self-care. And what I know now is that's the worst kind of self-care you could ever do for yourself. So that's my personal story about how I started using it. But the women who come to me, they all have their unique reasons, sometimes a combination of them. That's how I used it.
What would you say to someone now that perhaps is going through that gray zone drinking problem and they've been rather unaware or perhaps not admitting to themselves that could this be causing more trouble than I need right now, and they might be ready to take that leap?
In fact, that's the number one question I get when somebody inquires about working with me is that the first thing they tell me is, I'm not really sure I have a problem. Then they walk me through a day in their life about their drinking habits. And when we talk a little bit more about it, and when I point out to them, so in our conversation, this number of times you've told me alcohol is involved in your day-to-day life. And when they start to see it up front, mirrored back to them, they start to understand, oh, I think I do have a problem. And the other people I work with will come to me sometimes and say, I think I have a problem, but the people around me tell me I'm just being silly and I don't have a problem. And my advice to them is, if you think you have a problem, you have a problem. Don't let anybody else tell you that you're crazy or what have you. Because honestly, in our culture, we are taught that you have no problem with alcohol or you have a problem that warrants going to AA or to rehab. And what I'd like to share with those women is I'm here to help you. I'm the safety net, the emergency brake, so that you never have to get to the point where you have to go to AA or to rehab. I want you to do something about it right now.
And it's refreshing to have this conversation for those women who are in that particular moment in their lives. And I think it's so self-empowering when you can say, I no longer need it. And we had this conversation before we started this podcast. And since we're going real and raw in this season, I walked away from alcohol this summer. And I just realized that I don't want to have those situations in my life anymore, where perhaps I'm putting myself at risk, or I'm putting other people at risk, or I'm self-sabotaging because I am turning to alcohol, like I say, to reward myself for perhaps having had a really successful week or putting in a lot of work in this week to celebrate. There are so many other ways to celebrate. And I was feeling like at times it was causing problems in my life. And I can say that. I wasn't reliant on it on a daily basis or weekly basis, but it's not good. And I think alcohol has so many negative effects in our lives that I said to myself, it's time for me to walk away. And I want it to be forever. I don't want to dabble with it. And I feel so much better over it.
I'm so delighted for you because you're discovering for yourself what I have, what other women have, that this thing that we are told is liquid courage. It helps you feel more confident. It helps you feel more attractive. None of those things are true. It was all a big marketing package to get you to drink some more of this beverage that, quite frankly, it's, when you look at it in the literature, it is a class 1 carcinogen and it's a neurotoxin. But we've been sold, and it's been packaged up in beautiful packaging, that this is a reward. This is a treat. It's mandatory for celebrations. And it's just been completely woven into the fabric of our culture that you can't be happy or celebrate if you don't have this particular thing in your glass to accompany the celebration. As we're keeping it real and raw, I'll share a little bit more of my story. It got to a place, even though I was in this gray zone, I got to a place where I was incredibly ugly and mean to myself. And it revolved around, why am I on this hamster wheel of, okay, I'm not going to have anything to drink anymore. I'm just done with it. And then the end of the day would come, and there I was, pouring the drinks, right? And it even got to the place where this stuff didn't even taste any good anymore, and I'm still drinking it. So what was happening to me was, because I was so frustrated with this, I was telling myself things like, because I always woke up in the middle of the night, and I called myself Traff, right? I would say to myself, what the fuck is wrong with you, Traff, that you keep doing this to yourself? These are things I was telling myself. You dumbass. You have got to pull yourself together, and you've got to get a handle on this. What the fuck is wrong with you that you keep winding up in this situation, right? This is how I literally spoke to myself on a day-to-day basis. No one should ever speak to themselves like that. And that was one of the first steps that I took, is I started listening to how I was speaking to myself. And I didn't speak to myself when I didn't have something to drink like that. I never spoke to myself. But when I drank like that, it was like two different Kathryns emerged, right? Mean Kathryn, and then vulnerable, weepy, snivelly Kathryn. And the two were battling each other. And when I started understanding that, oh my gosh, listen to how I'm speaking to myself every time I find myself in a situation, I wanted to get off that treadmill too. And so as I started understanding the way the brain works, I had to look at how I was talking and treating myself. I would never speak to you, Ray, like that. If you came to me and said, oh, you know what, Kathryn, I went out last night and I had something to drink and I didn't mean to, I would never say anything cruel to you. I would say, okay, no worries. We fell down. We're going to get back up again and let's get going, right? And I'd probably call you honey, or I'd call you sweetheart, right? Any of those things. I would be very kind to you. And so that's one of the first changes I started making in getting myself into a place of feeling worthy, that I could walk away from this. I could do it. I was worth doing this for. And when I made that shift in my mind, it's like all the dominoes started to fall.
Yeah. And it's amazing, really, when you start to see the difference. Alcohol affects so much. I know my last incident of drinking was not nice. I was not proud of myself. I nearly walked out on a motorway after drinking because I was lost. I didn't know how to navigate home. And when I got home that next morning, I said to myself, Ray, you will never do this again. I know my family was mad at me, and I have a young daughter, and I was mad at myself. I looked in the mirror and I said, Ray, you will never, ever put yourself in that situation again. And that was it. I said, this ends here. I can't afford for my young daughter to see me intoxicated or to put myself at risk because you're too drunk or you're too intoxicated to figure out how to get home safely. That's just not what a responsible woman is doing in her life, right? So I just said, that's not part of who I am. Not who I am now. Maybe when I was young and reckless and I didn't care, I didn't have anyone rely on me, but not the person that lives in this body right now. And I just had to say no more.
I'm so happy that you were able to see that. Because you're significantly younger than I am, I'm so happy that you will be avoiding the trajectory that I found myself on. My whole gray zone drinking started later in my life, and I want to make sure that anyone listening today understands that it can develop at any point. Maybe you never even touched alcohol in your 20s and 30s, but at some point, maybe you started drinking a little bit to to fit in or because your husband drinks something or whatever the reason might be. So I want people to understand that it can pop up at any time and that's okay. It doesn't mean something's wrong with you. But it does mean if you are concerned about it, it does mean now's the time to do something about it. So I'm just delighted for you that you were able to come to this conclusion now.
I'm feeling really emotional speaking about this, Kathryn, because
Me too. Yeah.
I just hope whoever is listening to this episode right now, perhaps having those aha moments to say, I can walk away. I can be stronger than that. And there is help for them. I just really hope that this episode is going to change some lives.
I think one other thing I'd like to share, the thing that happened to me more than 3 years ago was the worst day ever of my career. And it also turned into my day one of my new alcohol-free life. But what I want to share today, because I do hear this sometimes from the women that I work with, and I think somebody needs to hear it today too, is in my middle 40s, I was at a place in my career, in my marriage, where things were at a breaking point. And as a result, I had in those days, we used to refer to it as a nervous breakdown. And I had gotten to the point of, I was severely depressed. I was on the verge of losing my job. And I had gotten to the place of, I literally had come up with a plan for my own suicide. What I was struggling with was I didn't want my husband at the time to be financially hurt by that. So I was trying to come up with a plan that I could commit suicide, and it looked like an accident. And I can talk to you calmly about it now because I'm on the other side of that. And that's a whole other story about how I got out on the other side of it. And this is why I want to share it today in case anybody's listening. At the time, it made perfect sense. Of course, killing myself was the thing to do. It made perfect sense. This will end. My husband will be okay because I'll come up with this perfect plan. All the problems will be over. And there was just enough of the Kathryn I love dearly today left in her. And she spoke up and said, you need to call for help. This is not normal. This is not right. I had spent time working as a psychiatric specialty manager for a pharmaceutical company. And I understood that I have severe depression here. And I actually got a tool that physicians used and I scored myself. And when I called for help and explained to them, here's who I am, I just scored myself. And I had depression and this, and this. The hospital staff was amazed. And to their credit, they saw me right away and I got help right away, therapy, medication, and I came out on the other side of it. But I'm sharing this story today because there are some women who come to me who their drinking is a symptom of an underlying depression. And I want them to also know that there is help for you. You do come out on the other side. I was there. I came back. I had an amazing career in my neuroscience chapter of my life. And thanks to the worst day of my neuroscience career 3 years ago, I'm an entirely new chapter now, using everything that I've learned to help serve you. And I'm on a mission to help women, to help them get back into the place of their lives where they know they can thrive, where they believe they're worthy to thrive, and to start building a life that is in alignment with who and what they are right now. So for whoever's listening, I want you to know there's help on the other side of this.
Oh, wow. Kathryn, I'm so glad you sought out for help and the other side of you spoke up that your life is too valuable. And I think that's the important part we didn't actually get to touch on today, that, as I say, it might just be a symptom of a deeper problem. And I worked in this space quite a long time now, where struggles in life, relationship breaking down, family loss, trauma, or accidents can trigger you going into a downward spiral of drinking and self-sabotaging. And that's just a symptom of something more that needs to be looked into. And I'm so glad that you brought it up, because I think that's really important to remind our audience that love yourself. There is There's more to life. There's more to you than the alcohol that you're perhaps consuming right now. And the person that you might be looking at yourself in a mirror and not loving that person right now because
Mhm.
of pain and suffering and challenges. Believe me, I've been there. Kathryn, as you were saying that, I've been there. I looked at myself in a mirror. I was going through daily alcohol as well to numb the pain. And I looked at myself in a mirror in my mid-20s. I couldn't recognize myself. I didn't know who that person was. And I couldn't find myself. But that was, again, symptoms of depression, just like for you. I'm so glad we're having this conversation. So important for women to be reminded that their lives are worth something. And look at what you're doing today. I mean, you wouldn't be here doing all these amazing things. And may I just say, before we got on the podcast, you were telling me about this beautiful trip and you've been traveling a lot and you're off to Argentina to fulfill one of your visions that you had. I mean,
Right.
you're living a beautiful life. And I want that to be the future of the women who are listening to this podcast and thinking that their life is at the end.
The thing that is so concerning to me is the number of women who come to me who truly don't think they are worthy of living a life better than what they have right now. And they get in this place of unbelief, they get in this place of depression. And you're right, that the alcohol for them becomes the mechanism that I'll just forget about all the things that I don't want to think about right now. It helps me quell that mean voice in my head. I was the opposite. It brought out the mean voice. But many people share with me, it quiets down their mean voice that they have. So I want anyone listening today, if you're telling yourself, I'm not worthy of living this amazing, beautiful life, and especially if you're in the midpoint of your life, maybe you're telling yourself your life is over. I want you to understand that it's completely opposite for you. And as soon as you start taking some steps to value yourself, then you really can turn your life around. And Raimonda's proof, Raimonda's not midlife. Just want to clarify that. But I'm proof as well. And I have a whole slew of clients who are proof that you are worthy of putting yourself first and living a life that is meaningful to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't imagine if I didn't turn my life. Honestly, I would have ended up completely not where I am today, probably a junkie with nothing, no relationships, because
Yeah.
my family didn't want to see me like that. They
Yeah.
didn't want to see me drinking and self-sabotaging. I mean, it's not a good place to be. Your life could be different.
I will share with everyone who's listening the thing that I told myself, and this is just really brutally honest here. Nobody wants to be around a sad old drunk lady. And it's the truth, right? And I made the decision at 55 to stop drinking because I understood I'm not a young woman anymore. And drunk 25-year-old women are kind of funny. Not really. It's a little bit more sad. But a drunk 55-year-old is not funny. In fact, it's annoying and nobody really wants to be around you. So when I faced that brutal truth about nobody really wants to be around you when you're drunk, it hurt. It hurt a lot, but I understood the truth of it. So I want people who are at the midpoint of their lives to understand that there's serious consequences involved and you deserve better than those serious consequences.
Yeah. So much more to life. You deserve so much more. You can have a whole totally different and transformed life today. Kathryn, as we come into a close of this conversation, I want to say thank you for being here, for sharing your truth and being so honest and raw about your experiences and how you got out of it. I mean, it's not an easy thing to discuss and talk about our experiences to the public. And same for me. And I promise when we started this podcast series, I said, I'll be as honest as I can be to tell our audience the truth, because we all have gone through some things and there's no shame in your experiences. And I want you to know that you're not alone. And if people are struggling and if they are feeling really alone on their journey right now and they need the help and support, where can they reach out to you, Kathryn?
You can find me on my website. It's called revivesoberspirit.com. You can find out a little bit more about who I am and what I do there, and you can email me there as well. You can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Kathryn Traff, Kathryn, and then the last name is like traffic, Traff, but without the IC. Those are two really good places to reach out to me.
Beautiful. So that's revivesoberspirit.com.
Yes.
If you didn't catch that. And of course, everything will be in the show notes as well. What I do encourage you to do is follow Kathryn's journey, connect with her on social media. If you're feeling kind of on the edge or just having those thoughts, just reach out to her for a friendly conversation.
Absolutely.
It costs nothing, and it might be just the beginning of the journey for you to starting a completely new life and walking away from alcohol. And as Kathryn says, never miss it again.
Never miss it. Yes. Reach out to me. We'll have a friendly conversation. If I'm not the right person for you to work with, we will find you the right person. But you deserve it.
Yeah. Well, I think you are the right expert in this field. And I love that you come from such a long history and background in medical field, because your level of understanding and appreciation of the health effects of drinking, it's really so much more. And you having had this long experience and overcoming it yourself, it just puts you as an absolute expert in this field. So highly encouraged to our listeners to reach out if you felt that this conversation really inspired you to make a change.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Raimonda. And ladies, it's always worth it. It's always worth it. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it.
Absolutely. I can definitely say that's true. Kathryn, we will be seeing more of you as you are this year's speaker for the Women Thrive Summit. So for those of you who may not know, we do have an annual Women Thrive Summit that happens third week of March. And Kathryn's one of our headline speakers. So I'm very excited to see you at the summit, Kathryn.
I'm excited too. I've never done anything like this before in my life. And so there's one more piece of evidence for all of you ladies that you can completely turn your life around, and you have the energy and the courage and the excitement all on your own to do brand new projects. So thank you to Raimonda for offering me the opportunity to speak.
I'm so excited. I'm so happy that you will be on our summit. Our summit takes such a holistic approach to success in life and business. And I think this subject, we've never covered it, neither on a podcast, neither on the summit. And I think this is an important conversation to be had. And we're going to save some lives. I'm sure of that.
Yeah. Yep. That's my mission. That is my mission.
Kathryn, I want to say have wonderful travels as you head out. Where are you headed to again?
Argentina.
Argentina.
At the end of October. Yeah. Like you mentioned earlier, it was a vision I had for myself 3 years ago, and it's coming true.
Amazing. We'll have the most amazing time. I'll be checking out your social media channels to see how your trip goes. And for all of you listeners, please make sure you connect with Kathryn. We look forward to seeing you on another episode. Take care for now. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Women Thrive Podcast. If you found today's episode empowering and inspiring, be sure to subscribe and follow us. Better yet, leave a review and share it with others. We're committed to bringing you more stories that will empower and inspire you on your own journey. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep pursuing your dreams.